I wonder how often we would ask ourselves a question as Christians: how shall we live? When we read through the Bible, we have some moral ethnicity that tells us this is how we should live. And what gives us the strength to live that way? Well, Paul deals with that today in Philippians chapter 2, verses 12 and 13, where he says, "So then, my beloved, just as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure." When we look at this, we have the two S words that jump out at us, I hope. And one of them is salvation and one of is sanctification. How are we born again? And once we are born again, now what? And so Paul, with great affection, as the apostle writes to the people at Philippi, calling them his beloved, commends them for obeying, not just when he was there and looked good before them, but even when he was gone and he heard the good news. Well, so what did that mean? That means it wasn't the fear of Paul that motivated them to live holy lives. And so he says, I'm not there, but I want you, this is the end of verse number 12, to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. There's an aspect of the Christian life that is fear and trembling. I don't know if you have that. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Or do you just see, I'll just do what I do and hope I come out okay, and I know that Christ's blood cleansed me from my sin, so I'm fine. Well, is there a difference in the life of a Christian and the life of a non-believer? Well, hopefully the answer to that is, well, yes, there is a difference. And it's a holy difference. Are we challenged by it? Yes. And that's why I think he uses those two words, fear and trembling. Fear of what? Fear of God? Yes. What would be the trembling part? Trembling because we are fearful that we're going to displease people around us. And that could take place too. Sometimes we live a life before our spouses, and it's not that we're trying to make them mad all the time, and there's a little fear and trembling there in a good way. But when he uses those two words, he concludes that with a semicolon and then just jumps down to how come it can happen that way. Because verse number 13 says, "For it's God who is at work within you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure." That's filled with a lot of grace, isn't it? With the will. There's a desire to please God. Where does that come from? Grace. And to work. There's the power. So we have the desire, we have the power to please God. And we do that with fear and trembling. I don't know, maybe we find ourselves, I want to be holy, so I'm going to work at being holy. I'm going to read the Bible a lot. I'm going to go to church. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to be nice to everybody. And all those things are fine. I think we ought to do all those things. But where does the desire to do that come from? If it's just a desire in us to please men, then the last of it is gone, isn't it? It's not for his good pleasure. It's for our stubborn rebellion that we want people to think well of us. So I challenge you today. Cry out to God, knowing that you have been born again. And then know that he is at work in you, both to will and to work for that which pleases him.